Welcome to The Brain Dump, where we study the psychology of success. Join us as we probe the habits, rituals, and routines of top-performing artists, entrepreneurs, authors, athletes, and more to uncover the timeless principles we can all use to take our lives to the next level. Are you ready to plunge the grunge that's been gunking up your mind's eye? Great, then let's get to it.
Welcome to The Brain Dump. It has been, months since Austin and I have recorded an episode of The Brain Dump. Now, for you listeners at home, these come out every single week, but the way we do these is we batch them. And it's been a while since we've recorded. So we're rusty, or that means we're really well rested. Which one is it, Austin? Are you feeling rusty or feeling rested?
I feel lost when I don't have this conversation with you. You know, my heart just doesn't feel as full as it does right now. And then, look who we got in the house today. It's kind of like we've been stealing him back and forth, really. So we'll see who gets more attention today.
Wait. Yeah, let me lay the groundwork here for the listeners at home who have no idea what we're about to drop on them. So first of all, Austin is a very, very sweet man that I will never say anything bad about, except for this. He's trying to steal the guy that we have on the show today from me. He is mine, Austin. He's a fantastic human being and somebody I think is going to bring a ton of value to the show. But Austin has been trying to steal him from me for the last couple of months, and I'm just not happy about it. But I'll put that aside. Today, we're gonna bring as much value to the listeners as possible. We have a guy with us today named John Blanton. You might not be familiar with him, or you might be familiar with him. I don't know. But one way or the other, by the end of this show, you're going to walk away being like, dang, that guy's got it together. He's going to drop some big wisdom bombs on us. So I'm not going to give you any more intro than that. I'm not going to give you a bio, nothing like that. Just this is John Blanton. So Mr. John, how you doing?
Let's dump. Let's do this. I'm hyped up. What are you?
John's ready to take a dump.
Yes,
ready to take a dump in the brain dump.
That's what I came here to do, right? Come on. I didn't do any pre-work or anything. You didn't expect me to know what was going to happen, did you?
We keep things really vague for our guests. Like, we don't tell them what we're talking about or even what the show's about. We're like, hey, just want to come chat? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. So John, what are we going to talk about today, man? Like, that's the question. We never know what the topic's going to be until we get in here. So what are we dumping on?
Yeah, man. Well, you just threw that at me last minute. So, I've got a good one, and I'm going to put you guys back a little bit, but I kind of want to better understand how you guys define success and what moving towards success in your life looks like.
Oof. Wow. What's interesting is this is perfect conversation. I had played golf on Friday with a friend who is an investor who just left his job at 28 years old. And he's got enough passive income coming in where he's traveled around for a month at a time. He's going out of the country. And we were playing golf, and he plays golf about every day and still runs his business through his VAs. And we were making jokes about all the people that tell you to push it, and how you have to scale. And we were talking about, like, none of us really want that. And so the question is he's bringing in probably like 15, 20K a month. And so he's like, well, if I took it to 40, would I have to bring on people to work for me and overhead and all this extra stuff? And so I think that's where that success label is hard to put your hand on it, because ultimately what the success means to me is, am I living the lifestyle that I want to create for myself? And over my life, maybe that lifestyle gets bigger and bigger, but it doesn't mean that my business has to get bigger and bigger, if that makes any sense.
Well, it kind of is interesting, right? Because you said if you scale it, right? And what do you really want? And I think that's what we get so caught up on, is when you really distill it down and understand what you want, is that really what society or social media or all these exterior factors are really pushing us towards, right? So I think I know your dude. Is that another John that you were chopping it up with? Yeah, he's a really good dude. Yeah, no, I know. He's a really good dude.
He's my dude, man.
Yeah. He's the man. I mean, maturity way past his years, but kind of to that point, and him and I have had similar conversations in the past. And I think that's the direction that me and, my wife, I'm so fortunate. I have just a loving and beautiful wonderful and extremely motivated wife that, she's going to whoop my butt here pretty soon, coming up with all the different business ventures and things that she has going on. And I'm just so fortunate because we just aligned so well, right? I mean, even today we were having a disagreement about attorneys and how we're going to structure contracts and stuff, so in the weeds, sometimes obviously it gets a little nitty gritty, but I mean, deep down, for us, it's really being able to do what we want when we want. One thing that's important to us is we pick up our daughters every day. Both of us drive. It's about 5 o'clock. So fortunately, we've been able to do that for about the past 3 years. And it's just a family tradition, right? So every time that one of us isn't there, they're like, hey, the kids are like, hey, what's going on? Right. And I mean, just something as so simple as that. Right. And I think so many times people want to build this massive portfolio, be it real estate, be it equities, be it businesses, whatever the case is, right? So for us, we're really trying to find ways and find opportunities that we can really scale and leverage our time. I know you guys were hating on my boy MJ DeMarco a little bit, saying he's not necessarily your cup of tea, but the one thing that he brings up is leverage of time, right? If you don't know how to leverage time, you're ultimately, in my mind, going to fail, right? Because you're tied to something else, right? So it's either leveraging, you mentioned before, with VAs, employees, independent contractors, whatever the case is, right? You need to detach yourself from time and the ability to earn, right? And that's when you kind of have to get this leadership persona and mentality and be able to delegate responsibilities, right? And so I think that's for folks that hear scale. It just means, what does scale mean to you, right? We don't want a business with 50, 100 employees, because that's 50 relationships we have to manage, right? I mean, we've all been employees before, right? I mean, it's a challenge sometimes, right? I mean, you're like, hey, like they've got me, working around the clock and they aren't paying me anymore. Or, I've got to do this on a weekend and I really don't want to. And so I think, we don't want to have those relationships, right? So we want to have kind of a close knit circle of confidants and folks that we can leverage and we can put in positions to succeed. But it isn't the scale, and it's not necessarily even an income target. I think you guys have probably seen this as well, but like when you really distill it down, making money is not hard, right? I mean, there's a very proven process to making money, but finding happiness is such a challenge, right? Because the rabbit of money is so easy to continue to follow. And I think that's the struggle that a lot of us run into. So I don't want to take the entire episode, but Anthony, I'd love your take on this as well.
Lamborghinis and like Monte Carlo inspired binges. That's happiness for me. It's interesting. That does
sound fun though. We should do that. That does sound fun. We got to do
fun. It sounds fun. So when you're talking about making money is not hard, but happiness is really the currency that matters. And it's one that most people don't know how to make. And so what they do is they falsely equate making money as a substitute for the currency of happiness. There's a really good book by Scott Galloway called The Algebra of Happiness, which I thought is really good. It breaks down in like tactical steps, like how do you become happy? And there's a study, I can't remember who conducted it, but it was the longest running study of happiness ever conducted. It was an 80-year longitudinal study of thousands of men and looking at their lives and saying what led to happiness. And this study was really interesting because the very first line of it is maybe the best line ever written for a scientific study. And it was, I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's something to the effect of happiness is love, full stop. So at the end of the day, what they found was the things that contributed to happiness were the things tied to love, like love of the people around you or love of experience. It's not things. And so, and then when you're talking about leveraging your time and understanding that really success, like at the core of that question, what is success? For me, it's about two things. One is happiness, and the other part of it is fulfillment. And because it's not good enough just to be happy, because I can go to Monte Carlo and be happy, but I won't be fulfilled. And that's the part that like really people lose sight of, is like, what are you doing that leads to fulfillment? And that is finding the tasks or the organizations or things in life that allow you to work towards a goal that you're like, this has meaning, this has purpose. And without that, then happiness is, I mean, you could just go do heroin and be happy. Like that's not a long-term solution. So when people are like, I just want to be happy, it's like, no, that's not enough. You gotta have fulfillment. And you don't usually find fulfillment on the easy side of the coin. You find it on the difficult side where you're being challenged and growing. And we said it on another episode pretty recently where you get to choose your hard. You know,
Mhm.
you get to live the life of your dreams. That's hard, but you also living the life of not your dreams is hard. So you get to choose your hard.
Well, I don't, but don't you think that on the back of that, the most interesting point is that, we were talking, we were writing our book session about nobody lives by their code or their values anymore. And the reason that people don't know what their success looks like to them or happiness looks like to them is because they're living other people's injected values.
Yes.
And they're not understanding what really makes them tick. And like my happiness, right? Like we're moving again. And everybody's like, oh, good Lord. And I'm like, dude, I'm happy as a clam. Like I'm going to spend August in San Diego and Utah and visit friends. And everybody's like, I don't understand how you travel so much. Well, if I lived based on their life, like I'd just be stuck in my apartment, but that's not what I like. And so it's taken a lot of blowing up my life and moving things around and leaving jobs and losing money to understand what truly makes me happy. And if traveling and meeting people is what makes me happy, then how much I make per month is basically irrelevant compared to what is happiness to me.
Yeah, we had a guest on, Leland Redfield, who used the term injected values. And I've always thought of it like this, is that people are just in general living or trying to pursue a dream that's not theirs. They're pursuing the American dream or the influencer dream without ever stopping to reflect, like, is that really your dream? Is that really what you want? Do you really want 50 employees or 500 employees or a $1 billion company? And like, is that really what you want? Or is what you want something a little bit more attainable and less, and not less in the sense of like, it's not as good. It's just, I think people don't do the hard work of evaluating for themselves. What is it that they really want? What are they really dreaming? Because that's hard. And you can't read a book on it. Nobody can give you the answer. The only way you get the answer is if you sit there and do the digging into your soul yourself. And you nailed it on the head. Nobody lives by a code anymore. If you're religious and you adhere to like a religious doctrine, then you might have a code. But by and large, most people don't adhere to it in a like, this is core to who I am type of way. And I think I'd be really interested to take the conversation into those murky waters, because if you have a code that you live by, now you have a framework and structure for your life, for who you are, and you can understand where you are in relation to the rest of the universe at any given moment, which is step one to figuring out where you want to go, is knowing where you are. Right. And so let's talk a little bit about a code. Like, John, do you have any kind of like personal code of ethics or code of beliefs, or think like something that you live every day where like, this is who I am, how I navigate the universe?
Well, I mean, I think it's a challenge, right? You want to live in the moment, right? Because you want to be present and enjoy what you're doing, but you also want to have eyes on a bigger picture, right? And I think even if you just distill it down, again, back to finances, the majority of this country or the majority of the world doesn't have enough savings to cover a $400 expense, right? I mean, what's more than living in the moment than if something happened, with your car, with a family member, or an injury or an unexpected expense comes up and you can't afford it, right? I mean, so obviously we're distilling that down to financially, but also just that's how everybody's living their life. Like, I mean, if your financial life is in that way, then the rest of your life is probably similar to that, because the majority of things you want to do, spending time, control, and freedom is also tied to that. So unfortunately, there's this huge interdependency between finances and freedom. You don't have to have finances or, strong financials to have freedom. But ultimately, the majority of us, to get to the goals that we want, we need some semblance of strong finances so that we can have control and freedom of choice of, hey, I'd like to go on a vacation. I'd like to go to Monte Carlo. I'd like to get that Lamborghini, right? We don't have to have it, but it's something that, hey, I aspire to this. So I just think, back to the point around, just in general, people don't have this code that they live by. I think we're just so stuck in living in the moment, right? Or just even, I don't even know if the moment, maybe it's the millisecond, right? I mean, our attention spans are just astronomically getting shorter here. And I just think as our attention spans get shorter, our values, to your point, are going to minimize, because what does it matter, right? What does in 10 seconds or in a minute or in 20 minutes in this interview, is the audience even paying attention anymore? Right. I mean, I hope they are, but I think that's really what it's coming down to is, what's the currency that we're talking about? And so just to give you kind of a backdrop on our side, right? I mean, it goes back to what you said, happiness is love, right? And for us, love is the relationships around us. Obviously, my wife, my daughters, right? We want to be able to have experiences with them. I mean, even just thinking back to some of my fondest memories of my life, right? It's events with my family when I was growing up, vacations we took, experiences we had. It wasn't material possessions that I was given, right? Of course, in the moment, right? Back to distilling it down to, hey, in the moment, yeah, that feels good and I enjoy it. But long term, it's the experiences that we have. And so, I mean, we really try to be present. Of course, it's something we can continue to do a better job of, but we be present, but then we also are constantly reevaluating where do we want to go? Where do we want to be? And ironically, as we get more successful, of course, our goals and aspirations continue to climb as well. But within that, we still try not to lose, the concept of ourselves, right? I mean, our income's grown exponentially, but we're still living in a nice middle-class neighborhood because we don't need that, right? We don't need a big house. We don't necessarily want that, right? We don't need a nice new car or anything like that. So I think we do a really good job. And, some of it's just luck. My wife and I just really coalesce from a financial perspective, right? She's not a big materialistic person. I'm not a big materialistic person. Of course, if there was something we wanted, we would get it. But, majority of the time, we don't want that, right? It's like, hey, we're going on a trip for her 30th birthday. She wanted to go on a trip to Hawaii, so it's like, okay, let's do that. Let's do exactly what you want. We're going to do all the different excursions. We're going to stay at the resort that you want. It was an amazing experience, right? Something that neither of us will ever forget. Her dad and her sister came along too, and it was just an amazing experience. And, looking forward as our daughters get older to be able to take them along on those experiences as well and just kind of adventure and see the world. So I know that was a long-winded response, but I hope that answered your question to an extent.
Well, what's interesting is to touch on your financial, like living in the moment financially in basic America. And I only know this because I lived through the hurricanes and saw the way that people react, is I think it all stems down to they don't think there's better on the other end of that. And so when they get something, I'm not worthy of it happening over and over again. This is the best I'm going to get. So I'm going to put it on a credit card. I'm going to extend myself because this is the only time I'm going to get lucky. And that's why I'm so enthralled with generational poverty, because I was talking to a kid the other day and I said, listen, I get that your goal was to be a millionaire and like make $1 million, but that's not the goal. I said, if you're getting out of generational poverty, leaving behind your mindset is what changes family tree, because that's the only thing they can't take away from you. So really, it's about self-worth and understanding who you are as a person and what you stand for, understanding that on the back end of that, those deals will come up over and over again. If you're a real estate investor, and maybe we have a different psyche than most, is that we know we miss out on this deal. There's another one coming. We're still going to keep hunting. But the general public, these jobs fall out or these things don't happen. They don't have the same entrepreneurial mindset as we do to think that the opportunities are going to keep coming. And maybe that's the bigger problem that we're seeing in America.
Well, I've heard that same comment before. So there was a gentleman that I really respect. And so he came from an inner city family in Philadelphia, and his brother is still quite impoverished, but he himself has created an outstanding life for himself. And so I was really curious, right? Because we only know our experiences that we grew up in, right? And so for better or for worse, that wasn't my experience growing up, right? I was in a fortunate upper middle class family, and there's nothing it is what it is, right? So I just didn't have those experiences, and so I asked him, what's the difference, right? Your brother is kind of just still in that same lane that he was in, that your family was in, but now you've attained this, and I guess at the time, maybe we deemed it societal success, but whatever, right? He's got a PhD, he's got a very successful career, he's got a beautiful family. So it's like, how do you guys, in my mind, fairly polar opposites where you guys are as adults, what happened? And he's like, to your point, Austin, he just said, he's like, it's a poverty mindset. He's like, it's just, and even watching this documentary, I watched this documentary on Netflix, and it's called Money Explained, right? And the entire time, anything that was about credit cards or debt or anything, right, was making an excuse and saying, hey, this is parasitic. This takes advantage of this individual. And it's like, well, that individual chose to put that item on that credit card. No one held a gun to that individual's head and said, hey, you've got to pay this credit card, right? So it was just interesting, just even in watching that, right? It was talking about student loan debt. It was talking about credit cards. It was talking, it was kind of just continuing to knock the institutions, right? And it was saying, oh my gosh, these big banks just continue to keep making money. And the folks that can get the black card and get all the credit card benefits back, right? They're not really seeing the negative of the credit card cost and all those expenses are getting paid for by the credit card APR that the folks that can't afford to pay off their credit card on a monthly basis are receiving, right? So, I mean, even the media ingrains it in everybody to be, we say, a poverty mindset or a victim, right? The media wants you to be a victim, right? And unfortunately, that's the direction that I see this country going, is more of that victim mentality instead of how do I overcome, right? What's going on good in this situation? What can I do to improve this situation, right? And that's kind of going back to the story. That's what he said, right? He just said, hey, I looked for the positives, I found opportunities, and I took advantage of them, right? I was as prepared as I could be when the opportunities came. Of course, not everything fell my way. It was difficult. It was a tough journey, but how do we get this mentality? And like you said, the mindset, how do we help folks come out of this and understand that opportunity is there for them? It may not be how they expect it, right? To your point around deals, right? We all think, hey, we found this perfect deal and it's going to work out, and it never does. But then there's this one that comes out of left field, and all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't see this coming, but I was prepared to take advantage of it when it did hit. And so I just think, kind of going back to the exterior factors, right? Unfortunately, I think those are, building these mindsets around the victim mentality and saying, hey, I'm not successful because of society. I'm not successful because of my parents. I'm not successful because of this, and again, yeah, I grew up very fortunate, but since then, I've been through a lot of struggles, right? I mean, professionally, I started off with a very low paying job. I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, moved across the country, no contacts, and was able to kind of attain, some level of success, in my opinion, and be financially independent by, a relatively young age. And so with a family, right, it's not just me and my wife or just me, right? I mean, I've got kids. And so, fortunately we can cover those expenses and stuff, or real estate in general. The only thing my parents ever knew about real estate was getting investment property foreclosed on, when my dad was, just early in his profession. And so I think that mentality is just really tough to overcome. And I think the media, regardless, it doesn't matter who you're on, right? If you're conservative or liberal, it doesn't really matter. They're victimizing each other, right? The liberals are saying, hey, the conservatives are doing this, can't be like them. The conservatives are saying, hey, the liberals are doing this to us, we can't really be them. And so ultimately it comes down to back to the values, right? What do you value? What do you see inside yourself? And what are you really looking to be at in this world, right? And I'd rather be accountable to myself, my family, those around me, those relationships, that love. And, the chips fall where they may, right? But all I can do is control what's in front of me.
I think of the phrase, I got a couple things that I want to unpack. One is, don't hate the player, hate the game. And it's like, well, why are you hating the game? The game is the game. I hate how you're playing it. So it's a way of displacing the responsibility and saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. Like turning us against the system or like the institutions. Like, no, the game is the game. It's the rules. Everybody's playing the same one. So all there is to hate is the player. So play it better, learn the rules, learn how to hone your skills. The other part of it is I want to share a story that never happened. And it starts like this. I got a friend. His name is Doug. And Doug's only goal in the world, he told me this, was to acquire as many tools as he could. He wanted all the wrenches. He wanted all the hammers, all the screwdrivers. He wanted all the saws. He wanted it all. When you think of like your grandpa's tool shed, he wanted that, but like on steroids. He wanted all the tools in the world. And I asked Doug, I said, Doug, what do you want to build with all that? What are you going to do with all those tools? He's like, no, I don't want to build anything. I don't care about that. I just want all the tools. I'm like, okay, well, that story never happened, but I want you to substitute the word tools in that story for money. Money is just the tool. It's not the outcome. It's not what you're building. And so think more about the house that you could build with those tools, with that money. And when you fixate on making the money and going back to Austin's example of the kid who wants to make $1 million, that's like saying, I want 1 million tools. It's like, okay, cool. But it's not about the tools. It's about what the tools enable you to do, what it allows you to build from that. And so fixate on that goal and who you have to become to be able to use those tools. Because it's one thing to have the tools. I can give you all the money in the world right now. I can give you all the hammers and the nails and everything. But if you don't know how to build the house, the tools don't matter. You're going to lose all your tools. They're just going to sit there and just not do anything for you. So it's all a really weird parable that I've just made up right now that you'll never hear anywhere else. That is the story of the boy with the purple marble.
It's amazing. You'd have to listen to the show to understand that. But well, what's interesting, right, is when you said I can give you $1 million. You know what set in my heart, and why I think everybody thinks they want the $1 million is they think that in their soul that's going to give them security. And actually, what it's going to do is freak them out even more. And so that's where I think the rub is that the human basic need is security, and they think the money's going to give them security. And what gives me security? You know what I said to someone? I had an interesting couple of weeks where I'm digging into my business and changing some things and kind of like not high, not low, but just kind of level. And what I realized that's different than me than the alcoholic, or different me than the drug addict, is I don't spiral anymore. I might have a bad day.
It's just a free fall.
But the mindset like hits a new level and just stops there. It doesn't go 9 layers deep because my mind says, "Oh, that's just ridiculous. That doesn't mean sense." So the number one question I get asked from anybody that I help, especially in our charity, especially in young people I help get out of recovery, this is the number one question they ask me. Well, do you ever have a day where you're doubting yourself? And my response is every day. It doesn't mean that I entertain it. And that's the difference. Is they're entertaining those thoughts. They're saying that they're true. But when you detach yourself from them and your mindset is set back so hard, you can realize that it's just a false narrative.
Ooh, can I share a story? And
Sure.
this one really did happen.
I had a good one too, but I mean, you're the
John,
host,
this one's
so
even better.
I don't want to jump in.
As
but
the host of the show, I'm pulling the host card. No.
Well, I was
no. Okay, John, you tell your story, and then I'll tell mine. And then for our dear listeners at home, you guys get to decide whose story was better.
Yes.
So I'm going to play on Austin's a little bit, and it's thinking back to when I was in corporate, right, in sales. So every time something, in sales is so day to day, second to second, right? You talk to a customer, it sounds like a really good conversation. They're ready to buy. And then 10 minutes later, they send you an email and you read it and, it doesn't say anything. It just says, thanks for the time. And you're just like, oh my gosh, like he didn't do a smiley face or whatever, right? And then you start spiraling and like, oh my gosh, this deal's dead. Like I'm losing all my money. Like I'm going to lose my job, right? So that's my mentality, right? So, every year, and you guys are going to make fun of me, but this is the reality. And I think this is the reality for a lot of folks. Every year I made more and more money. Guess what my thought was? I'm not going to make that much money again. I can't succeed. And the funny thing is, since I've left my job, and since I didn't really have a streamlined plan, it was just like, you know what, like, when is it going to be time, right? It's never perfect. And so, just you eventually got to jump, and we're in a good spot. My wife still works, so I'm not trying to say, oh my gosh, through caution of the wind, burn the boats. Like we were in a good spot. We had a lot of income coming in from other resources. But the point of the story is, ever since I left my job, every time I run into a problem, to Austin's point, I don't spiral. I don't think of, oh my gosh, I'm never going to make money again. I don't think, oh my gosh, this is going to ruin my life. All I think of is, man, this isn't going the way I thought it was, but I know I'm going to find a solution, right? And I think that's the mentality from a corporate perspective, is everything is fear mongering, right? Oh my gosh, like you hit plan this year. Well, good luck hitting plan next year, right? Oh, you made X. Well, can you do it again? But in reality, you've already done it. You don't need to prove anything else. You proved that it is possible. You've proved that you've done it. But then back to that mindset, every time I was just thinking, and it was fear, right? I'm not going to make that much again. Oh my gosh, I had a great year. I crushed it. This, and this happened. It was so lucky, right? That's never going to happen again. Well, guess what? Then I made more. And then I was like, oh my gosh, well, this isn't going to happen again. And so I think it's just these self-fulfilling prophecies and what we tell ourselves and the way that we interpret what other people are telling us. And I think that's one of the challenges of folks that are working in corporate. A lot of times it is based more in fear than reality. Right. And I mean, everybody, false expectations about reality. And I think that's what we get caught in. And that's where a lot of the time that victim mentality comes from. So Anthony, I mean, that's going to be tough to beat. So, you better lay it on thick, but we'll see what you got.
Never mind. I am good. I got no story. Nothing here to share. Sorry, guys. I just concede. I'll see myself out the door right now. That's a good story. I like that because I think it's something that we can all relate to, is that you're on this ever escalating high and always thinking like, this is as good as it's ever going to get. I'll never be able to do that again. And my story is from yesterday. So you guys that listen, you might know that I play tennis and I'm like really into that world. And yesterday was the French Open. It was the finals between Novak Djokovic and Stefanos Tsitsipas, which is a really fun word to try and spell out. So I challenge you, try and spell Tsitsipas. And this was one of the most remarkable matches. And afterwards, Djokovic had some really interesting insights. So to lay the context, to win a tennis finals Grand Slam match, you have to win 5 games. And he lost, or you have to win the best of 5 games. So you have to win 3 games or get there first. And his opponent won the first 2. So his opponent just needs to win 1 more. And this is looking real bad for Djokovic. Real bad. This is like almost insurmountable. You're pretty much just written off at this point. And earlier in the tournament, the same situation occurred where he was down 2 sets. And in both instances, he goes to the bathroom and he comes back a completely different player. And he goes on to destroy his opponents in the next 3 sets to win the French Open. And it's remarkable. And you're like, how is this possible? He goes to the bathroom, he comes out a completely different person. And they asked him about that. And he says, I talk to myself and I have 2 voices in my head. And one voice says, it's over. You can't do it. It's done. And the other voice is saying, you can do it. You're still in it. The game's not over. And he's like, in those moments, the one voice that's saying you can't do it is really loud. And so I just go and I talk to myself and I tell myself I can do this. And I feed that other voice and I drown out the other one that says I can't do it. And he comes back and he just keeps telling himself that, like, I'm still here. I can still do this. And he pulls off these remarkable comebacks. And just like, they call him the mental giant because you can't mentally break him. He's just, until the game's over, he's still in it. And it's remarkable because we all have that in ourselves. And it reminds me of there's like this Native American parable about this little boy and his grandfather. And his grandfather is telling him that inside of each of us, there are these 2 wolves, one of which is filled with, animosity and anger and rage and vengeance. And the other is full of goodness and, wisdom and peace. And they're constantly at war. And the little boy asks his grandfather, well, which one wins? And his grandfather says, whichever one you feed. And I think that is the most important message for anybody trying to get out of that victim mentality, trying to achieve success, however you measure that, is to realize that it's all about which wolf you feed.
So same host, because I was about to share that story. So same brain.
Zing.
But what's interesting, right, is one of the specialties in my coaching is victimhood mentality, which I do believe. I'll tell you this right now. And for anybody that wants to question me, DM me. I swear to God, I'll fight you tooth and nail. I think breaking the victimhood psyche is almost harder than anything I've ever seen in my life, because you are adopting a bunker. Everything is happening against me. I can't win. I know because I lived it for 20 years and the signs are very evident. And what you have to understand is if you can flip your mindset around to abundance and understand that there's so much out there for you, so much more love, so much more energy, so much more money, so much more everything. And you can have compassion and hope for the people around you instead of saying that you need it all, or like, we've become the society of like, yeah, I'll root him on and I'm happy that he got that. But like, really, I hate his guts. And it's like, whatever, dude, like it's all out there. And at the end of the day, if you give in, or you give to people and you give your time and you give more and you work out more and you eat better, and it all comes back to you 20-fold. Right. But that's not what we preach. We preach take. And I hope that the narrative changes by people walking around saying, you know what, my values are that I give to people. And maybe it's my time. Maybe it's when I'm really rich, it's my money. Maybe it's my mindset. Because what's interesting, right? And I'm sure, John, you have this with people that you talk to that maybe want to leave their W-2. When it clicks for them, it's like you put like special gas in their car all of a sudden, and they're like, oof. And like when I see somebody snap out of that victim mentality and they start diving into life, it's like a new person has just become. And I would imagine that there's been some of that in you to be able to remove your need to have to go to work for somebody else. I would imagine that, I talk to you in the mornings, you're ready to light some fires, and so I would imagine that maybe you didn't feel that way all the time going into your job.
Totally. I mean, and the problem with the mentality, I mean, you just alluded to it, but there's not very much money in it, right? I mean, who's going to help these people? And that's why the financial piece to me is so important, right? If my financial house is in order, I can focus on impact, right? If I'm worrying about myself, my resources, where am I going to get my next meal? Where am I going to get my next mortgage payment from? Right. So that's why the financial piece is so imperative to me, is because once my financial house is in order and I have all my basic needs met, my time is my own. If I want to value it at free, or, donate it to people that I know that I can help bring up, then that's going to be 10 times more impactful than me making $10,000 an hour. Right. It doesn't matter. And so I think that's the part, is like, once you get to a certain level, it's like, what can I impact? Right. What power can I lend to the world? Because to your point, 20 years of that victim mentality, it's, it is hereditary, right? It's systemic. But the problem is it starts at such a young age. And psychologically, our brains are forming at such a young age that, if that household is just used to, and so it starts in children, right? And that's the challenge, right? Once you get to them after that 20 years, a lot of times it's too far gone, right? So it's, how do we impact these families that have this income inequality, that have this house, this food insecurity, right? I mean, because these are the folks that really need the help more than anything. The reality is there's not enough money in it, right? Feeding the poor does not get you paid, right? What does get you paid? Telling people this is going to make you rich, right? That's what gets you paid. And so I think that's the struggle, right? And so that's why when you kind of go full circle, you have to take care of yourself first, right? And, fortunately, because of my that wasn't something that I had to fight as much, because I had other demons, right? Around my own aptitude and my own ability to be successful, right? I fought it the other way, because I was like, well, was I given everything, right? Am I even capable? Or is this just, good fortune, right? But I think that's why, from a financial perspective, it's so important to me, is because I can't help somebody if I can't help myself, right? And the reality is there's just not very much money in helping people that are poor, right? Because what do they have? What do they really have to give you? And that's the thing is, but once you're good and you're in a spot that you're financially secure and you can donate your time and your values to really help and bring these people up, that's what's important to me. And that's what we're really focusing on. And that's why we're working on getting our daughters more involved in philanthropy and these other things, because they need to see the realities of the world, right? We're not going to be able to help everyone, and that's not the goal, right? But if we can help one family, two families, three families, and help kind of this cycle start anew, that's really what we're wanting to focus on and move towards. And I just think that's the challenge right now, right? It's, you can start everything at zero, but I think, I can't remember where I heard this from, but if we equalized everything and gave everybody the same amount of money, everybody's got the same thing, the mindset doesn't change, right? So the top 30% of people are going to have all 70% of the money in 5 years, right? Because the thought process and the mindset hasn't changed. So really the resources aren't really the issue. Back to your point, it's the mindset and the mentality and how those people spend that money, right? Because the people that didn't have as much before, they're going to say, well, now we're good, right? We're going to buy these material possessions that we never had. The people that now have less are going to say, oh my gosh, we need to work even harder and we need to strive even more to save or protect or invest or whatever we're going to do, right? And so, I think that's one of the things that we're really trying to focus on is how can we provide more impact at scale, right? And that's challenging, but being able to be around folks like yourselves and lock arms with people and say, how can we impact these people and how can we do it at a higher level? Of course, we need to make money. We need to have income. We need to have resources to be able to sustain our lives and do the things that we want to do. But at the end of the day, it's the lives that we impact that are really the lasting imprint, from ourselves, right? A lot of those other stuff are just, more selfish ventures, which, there's nothing wrong with that, right? We want to take care of ourselves and we want to do things that we enjoy. But I think that's the big part that I think is the biggest struggle and the challenge. And I didn't really realize it until more recently when I read a lot more about psychology and how critical it is at such a young age, right? And so when you're talking to these kids that are 10, 12, 15, 16, 20, right? they've already lived that their entire life. So being able to change them, not that that's not a worthy venture and you should try. It's just a lot more difficult than if you can catch them at the front end and really help pull these families out, right? So that the parents don't have to fight about money. The parents don't have to be out of the house all the time. The grandparents don't have to be taking care of the children, right? And I think that's where, when you look at it from a systemic perspective, where it really gets to be challenging, right? Because we're only one person, right? We can impact what we can, but unfortunately we don't have the scale of our time to impact every family that's out there.
Austin, you mentioned something before about the victimhood mindset being like the toughest thing in the world to break. And it got me thinking that why that might be the case. And I've been thinking about the framework of victimhood is an impregnable fortress. And nobody can get in. Nobody can break it down. Like, you're in there and you've created this thing and it's unassailable. And that can feel safe and it can make you feel secure. It's a false sense of security because you're in this building that's rotting and it doesn't have, any of the things that makes life worth living. But you think it's like this fortress that you've created around yourself to protect yourself. And in actuality, it's not that. It's an inescapable prison. You think it's this impregnable fortress. In reality, it's a prison. And the only person who can free you from that, the only person with the key to the door, is you. So you've chosen this fortress / prison for yourself. And this is, I think it's why it's so difficult to break it down, is because you can show somebody, look, you have the key, but they have to be the one to unlock the door and they have to step through it and they have to be the one to never go back into that prison. And that's a battle that only they can wage every day.
This is the hardest lesson that I've had to learn as a coach, because I want to help so much and I want to give them the answers. But when I read the book Julie recommended to me, Super Coach, and he said, you are not the hero in their story. You are nothing more than a guide, that I have to pull them along, but they have to come to the aha moment themselves, because once it becomes ingrained in them, then it sticks. But by me telling them, like one of my clients that just left, that we did our coaching, and now he's off doing coaching in his real estate sector. He said, I thought when I hired you, you were going to teach me what to think, but you taught me how to think. And he goes, now I'm good for the foreseeable future. And so that's the issue, is that even in my previous marriage, where that fell apart, is that I kept trying to tell her what to do because I saw it, and she didn't want a fucking cheerleader, and she told me to get the fuck away from her. And so you, especially with your spouse, especially with people that are extremely close to you, you have to support them, but you have to step back and give them the space and to meet you halfway. And if they don't, that's on them. But we, at the end of the day, have to choose ourselves. And the number one thing I tell to people is, you want me to fight for you as a coach, but I can't fight for you if you won't fight for yourself. If you don't want to fight for yourself, there's nothing here for me. And it's the hardest thing, because I want to help. I want to jump in, but you have to come to me. You have to meet me halfway. And if you meet me halfway, then we can work together towards it. But if you're not going to fight for yourself, then I got nothing for you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? I mean, it's the same perspective when you talked about victimhood mentality, right? I mean, if they can't break the cycle in their own mind of, hey, nothing ever breaks my way, that person always gets lucky. It's not fair. Life just isn't the same for me as it is for them, right? I mean, there's nothing you can do. The reality is, they're just not, they're more than likely just not looking at their skills the right way, right? Because we all have unique skills that we're good at and we have aptitude for, and that we are able to become successful, right? It's just the application of those skills. And I think that's, to your point, that the most challenging part about coaching is, it's not, I was kind of equating it more to like the education system too, right? Because people are always like, oh my gosh, educators versus practitioners, right? And I've seen a lot of stuff about attorneys lately in particular. And they're like, most of the educators at law schools are just bureaucrats, right? They don't know anything about the business of actually making money in law, right? They know about teaching it. They know about, bureaucratic ventures and, making things way more complicated than they need to be, and how to fight each other, right? And how to litigate and how to make things more complicated and complex than majority of folks really need. But as far as, actually taking on those loans and the financial burden, and it was really telling because it said, he had taken on, I think a couple $100,000 worth of loans for law school. But he said the majority of attorneys in this country are solo practitioners that are working for themselves that are making less than $60,000 a year. Right. And so, I mean, you see this and we see the movies and we see everything. We see what society really says and thinks. But at the end of the day, what's the reality? And I think that's kind of the same thing, right? You can educate people till you're blue in the face, but if they can't get their mind right, and like, I am going to succeed, this is actually going to work out. They can have all, like Anthony, they can have the whole shed full of tools, right? They can have every tool in the tool belt or the toolbox or the tool cavern or whatever he's got for all the tools in the world.
The tool cavern. I love that.
but until they actually have the application, right? And it's kind of like that inception, right? You've got to lay those breadcrumbs and you've got to really take them to, have them led to that inception and that idea coming up in their mind. And I think that's the part that's challenging, right? But once they get there and they get it, then it's like, hey, boom, we're gone. We're off to the races. But, I just think that's so interesting. And I think that's the struggle with a lot of folks between the educational and the practitioner side is just, which one are you really going to be? And it's really hard to kind of be in the middle, right? You've really got to pick one side or the other. And I think that's why, kind of veering more towards the practical, because at the end of the day, the tactical stuff is, anybody can teach that, right? But being able to pull that out of somebody, how they can become the best version of themselves, that's really deep, right? Because you've really got to think and really mind through instead of just like, oh, you do A, B, and C, and then you get the result D. Right. I mean, it is what it is. Right. So no, I think that's awesome, Austin. I mean, I think that's really powerful stuff.
It makes me think of the professor of entrepreneurship. Like, you can go to college and get a degree in entrepreneurship, and it's like, be really careful who you're listening and taking advice from, because if your professor didn't make billions of dollars as an entrepreneur already and is now moonlighting as a professor, like, really take their feedback with a grain of salt.
You know what we call that in Texas?
They had no cattle.
Yeah, there you go. All hat, no cattle. So John, before we get you out of here, I know you have an amazing podcast and a couple stuff you're working on. Why don't you fill the audience in on all that stuff?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just wanted to take the time and say thank you guys. I really appreciate this. This has been a lot of fun, and I have a lot of respect for both of you guys. So just wanted to say thank you for letting me share the stage.
More, John? Who do you respect more?
I'll be honest with you, John.
Depends on what regard. It depends on what regard. It's like a score chart.
I'm my own man. I don't need anything. Anthony needs you.
I need your validation. Yeah. Give it to me, please.
Nah, I just feel fortunate for both of you to be in my circle. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, no. So I've got a podcast, Contrarian Cash Flow, and again, it even started off a little bit more tactical, right? But now we're kind of trying to err more on the side of practical, right? Getting in the minds of these successful entrepreneurs, understanding what it took from a mentality and a mindset perspective to get to success. So you can obviously check that out, contrariancashflow.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. We've got a lot of cool things coming out in regards to some of the tactical stuff, right? That's going to be more on the product side, but then also, offer coaching as well for folks that really want to take that performance to the next level. So you can find me on LinkedIn or contrariancashflow.com.
So I'd like to thank, even though I had the book before he told me about it, but he told me to really read it, and Buy Then Build, right? That's the name. Man, what a book. Really just kind of works with your mind, and books like that really allow you, in my opinion, to kind of build the platform that you're looking for. So make sure that you get book recommendations. Anthony, what are we going to send? We always like to give a little homework. Yeah. We're kind of like the Brad professor. Yeah.
Here's my homework for the week. It starts as it began. Well, so you guys might not know this, but I have a tattoo on my arm.
I just saw that.
You just see that? Yeah. And it says it ended as how it began, with a kiss. Now, ignore the kissing, but we are going to go back to the beginning for this piece of homework. It is this. How do you define success? What does that mean for you, dear listener? Go spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however long it takes. It's going to take a bit to really unpack, because you're going to be sifting through all the things society tells you should want and how to define success, but really get down to the core of what does success mean for you? What would that look like? And unpack it and write it down, and then make that your vision and make that be the guiding star, the code by which you live. That is how I measure my life, and that's success, is my success. So that's your homework. Go do it.
Love it. Thanks, guys.
Adios.
Thanks for joining us here at the Brain Dump. Now, before you go, it's important to solidify what you've learned here today by taking action. If all you do is listen, then you're only going to retain a small amount of the information you consumed here today. So take a quick moment to really lock in any key insights, tidbits, or pieces of wisdom that you want to carry with you into the future. You can do this by heading over to iTunes and leaving a review with your top 3 takeaways from this episode. If you've already left a review, first, thank you so much. Second, it's time to start a Brain Dump journal. It doesn't have to be fancy, just a slip of paper will do, where you can record a couple quick thoughts from each episode. Science shows this is one of the best ways to ensure long-term retention of new information. And finally, if you've got a brother, a sister, a coworker, or a best friend that you think would benefit from this episode, do them and us a favor and share with them this episode. Your support, as always, means the world to us.